Zoro, I'm the one who's frustrated. When girls get older, they become weaker than boys. Pretty soon, you'll all be stronger than me. Zoro, you're always saying that you're going to become the world's greatest swordsman. Dad says that girls can't be master swordsmen. You're lucky you're a boy. I want to become the world's greatest swordsman too. Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So, this is chapter 5 of One Piece, and over 20 years later, this is still probably one of the weirdest moments of One Piece. Now don't get me wrong, I understand the concept here. Kuina is a girl. Once they both hit puberty, it is incredibly likely that the fight will become unfair soon. But the story of One Piece is largely about dreams. The pursuit of them, regardless of whether they are achievable. Basically, in the world of One Piece, Oda establishes that nothing is impossible. Those who live with this mindset and have some desire do things that have never been done before. But in chapter 5, Kuina suggests that nope, that's not exactly true. It's all well and good to dream, but let's also live in reality. I believe not too many people think about this, but I think that there's just a general consensus that Kuina will be fulfilled when Zoro becomes the world's strongest swordsman. Certainly I think that Zoro himself believes this, because he never bought the excuse of Kuina being a girl and that being a disadvantage from the beginning. But you have this lingering question. If Kuina hadn't died, could she have done it? Even if Zoro could, it doesn't mean that she could. Guys, as I think too much about the dialogue from this scene, it conjures a different question for me. Kuina is watching Zoro from up in heaven, following his journey. But is she really fulfilled if Zoro achieves what she never could? And that is what is so weird. After over 1,000 chapters, 20 years, we are no closer to an answer. It's probably to the point that most people believe that this is something Oda wrote in the past and doesn't intend on using. Maybe at one point he thought he could. But I have a different idea, one that you have probably never heard before. One that utilizes everything that we know, but not in the way that you thought. So let's make an argument today for how Zoro becomes the world's strongest swordsman and at the same time fulfills Kuina's dreams. Remember to like, subscribe, click the bell, all that stuff. Let's begin. Over the last several months, we've talked a lot about the various parallels that exist in One Piece, and they are everywhere. But one of the most OG parallels that people picked up on is the comparison of Kuina and Tashigi. And it was easy to pick this up because Oda highlighted it in the story. Zoro meets Tashigi and is immediately reminded of Kuina because they look so similar. But honestly, this is one of the most hated discussions in all of One Piece. People do not like it, in part because it's so old, and the speculations that surrounded this. Things like Tashigi is Kuina. I promise you guys, we are not speculating that today, because that is not what I believe. Tashigi and Kuina look similar, but they are not the same person. Oda is simply highlighting the parallel. When you think of Tashigi, you should also think about Kuina. I believe that Tashigi is essentially what Kuina would have become had she been able to grow up. Tashigi, like Kuina, is a swordswoman. Tashigi, like Kuina, has a respect for the art of the sword and its history. And I believe that Tashigi, just like Kuina, at one point in her past when she was a child, dreamed of becoming the strongest. But then Tashigi, unlike Kuina, grew up, and reality got in the way of her dreams. I don't think that people in the One Piece community think too much about Tashigi because she is simply not a very powerful or important character. I don't think that anyone believes that Tashigi will ever become a top tier. In the current timeline of the story, she will never rival Zoro. There was a time when people thought that this could have been possible, but since then there just simply hasn't been enough Tashigi in the story, and we haven't seen the appropriate amounts of growth for this to make sense. For me, this is Oda's commentary on a woman as the world's strongest swordsman. Tashigi, she grew up, and the difference between her and men of the same age was too much to overcome. Her dreams were crushed at an early age. I believe that she lost her confidence, and in many ways her journey ended prematurely. Did she think that she could be strong? Yes. Did she think that she could be the strongest? No. Even though the desire still remained. The Cross-Guild chapter and Buggy's speech in chapter 1082 just makes me think about this more. I think that there's a lot of similarities between Buggy and Tashigi. Buggy, from the time that he was on Gold Roger's crew, pretty much gave up on dreaming big because of the mere presence of Shanks. But this chapter also established that even though it never made any sense for Buggy to end up on a level as Shanks he has, even if it is in name only. The whole point of his speech is that regardless of whether it makes sense, reach out for what you want most of all. And I think that this is a fitting message for Tashigi as well, although she wasn't there to hear it. As we've already said, the Straw Hats themselves and many characters in the story desire something that others consider to be impossible. But the message of the story is to pursue these things anyway. While it's easy to look at Luffy and the Straw Hats and see them as how everyone should be, it's just not realistic. The Straw Hats are built different. Luffy is an unusual boy, and the fact that he has full confidence in himself. Perhaps it's stupidity, but it is what it is, and that's what carries him. But I think that most other characters in the story, realistically, they need some kind of push. They need help. They need some idea of what can actually be achieved. And to me, this is like Gold Roger, sparking the golden age of piracy. Go find my treasure. And then Whitebeard later in Marineford, after 20 years, nobody has found his treasure, but he says, the One Piece is real. Broadcasted across the world. This is what many people need to hear, to continue the journey for something that may never be found. So I believe that this is true of Tashigi and would have been true of Kuina. In order for them to believe that they can achieve their dreams, someone must do it first. And we know who this person will be. It's Zoro, but we don't know how. I made videos a long time in the past talking about Buddhism in One Piece, and specifically relating Buddhism to Zoro, who follows Bushido, an ideology which relates to sword and spirituality. Oda wrote a very strange line for Zoro where he stated that he does not pray to God. And I believe that this foreshadows some sort of religious affiliation for Zoro. And I personally think that Zoro might be Buddhist, or at least follows Buddhist teachings, and that he is on a journey to spiritual enlightenment through his mastery of the sword. Basically, Zoro follows the paths of pain, and mastery of every single one of these paths will make Zoro simultaneously the world's strongest swordsman, but also obtain a level of swordsmanship that is not seen currently in the story. I'm not going to attempt to explain this theory as well as I've done in dedicated videos because it's just too much. But what you need to understand is that Zoro has certain techniques like Ashura, which you can relate to paths of pain, specifically the Ashura path. And Zoro has explicitly stated in the story in a fight for Kaku that he walks the 6 paths. Mastery of each one of these 6 paths provides Zoro some kind of strength boost. These 6 paths are the Naraka path, the Preta path, the Animal path, the Human path, the Ashura path, and the Deva path. Zoro, using his teachings of Buddhism, is able to create illusions, which represent each of these. The Ashura path again is obvious, but less obvious is Ichi and Ni Gorilla, as well as Enbima Yonezu Onigiri. Zoro has many auras that represent the animal, that in a similar way as Ashura transform his body and project a kind of aura. And I speculated in the past that Enbima Yonezu Onigiri is a representation of the Preta path, also known as the Hungry Ghost path. And likewise to Ashura and Ichi and Ni Gorilla, something about Zoro himself changes, and his swords begin to bend unnaturally. So then, connecting all these things and assuming that the human path is normal Zoro, we were left with, at the time of this theory, 2 paths that were not obviously demonstrated. The path of the Naraka, or the path of hell, and the path of the Deva, or the path of gods. It's actually incredible how well I predicted Zoro at the end of Wano, relating it to the Naraka path, or the path of hell. Essentially, in order for Zoro to master these paths, he must embrace the suffering related to them. And for the Naraka path, hell, the suffering is literally pain and suffering. And I thought that the nothing happened moment kind of foreshadowed this. It was off screen, but I felt like Zoro was able to survive this by embracing pain. Because he did not fear it or death, he could not be killed. And we see concepts related to this scattered throughout Wano. Zoro literally acquires a sword called Enma. Enma is the king of hell. I presume that using this sword inflicted great pain. And this pain was amplified in the Battle of Onigashima, where Zoro utilized medicine to help him continue to fight, but at the cost of inflicting great pain. Ultimately, at the conclusion, Zoro sees the Grim Reaper itself. He sees death, but he does not die. But more specifically, in terms of the powers granted by mastering the Naraka path, we compared Zoro to Luffy and to Brook. Luffy and his Red Hawk technique, and Brook's ice. Both characters have suffered an immense amount of pain, Luffy physically and Brook emotionally. And it's possible that they tapped into one of the 6 paths by chance and circumstance, and have both individually conquered it. And as an idea, I thought that by mastering the Naraka path, Zoro would be able to conjure either ice or flames. And as of chapter 1093 in the manga, this prediction has held true. We see Zoro is fighting Lucci and what appears to be flames emanating from his swords, something we had not seen from Zoro prior. And I believe it is because, following Wano, Zoro has mastered the path of hell. But I don't think that anybody found this too surprising. It's a natural progression regardless of any connections to Buddhism or the 6 paths. But the big speculation that we made is a further state of swordsmanship, which I called God Mode. In order to unlock this form, Zoro must master the path of the Deva, or path of gods. And this is all about letting go of pleasure. And I speculate in that video that this is a form that Mihawk has not mastered. Essentially, Mihawk is stuck at the Deva path. He enjoys combat of the sword, and being the world's strongest swordsman. And because of this, he is complacent, unable to pursue further spiritual awakening. And that is essentially the final step for a swordsman to achieve perfect swordsmanship. At the point that Zoro masters God Mode, he will have mastered all 6 paths and ascended to a higher level, higher than we have ever seen. But I think that doing this will actually carry another, more subtle benefit. Guys, throughout the vast majority of the story, Zoro is just literally stronger than everybody else, and this is commented on frequently. He's a monster, he's a beast, he is inhumanly strong. Yet at the same time, many of the techniques that Zoro has learned don't rely on physical strength at all. Cutting steel is not a feat of strength, just the same as cutting paper is not a feat of strength. It is a feat of skill. You can use Ichi and Ni Gorilla as an example, as we've speculated part of the animal path, but using this technique, Zoro's biceps literally grow so that he becomes much stronger than he actually is. And I presume that this technique is not a physical feat, it is a spiritual one. Kuina and her father believed that a woman cannot become the world's strongest swordsman, and they believe this because of physical attributes. Impossible dreams in the story of One Piece is a contradiction. And I believe that when Oda dropped this concept in chapter 5, at some point he must address it again. And I think that we have an idea of how he will. Even Koshiro does not know what perfect swordsmanship looks like. Because in my opinion, guys, it has never been accomplished. Certainly not recently. And this is what Zoro will do. Similar to Luffy, right? Luffy has inherited the dreams of those that have come before him. He has inherited them, and he will accomplish something no one else ever has. I think that Oda will put Zoro on a similar level. Zoro's journey is one generations in the making, built upon the accumulated desires of those that have already passed. Straight up, guys, I think that becoming the world's strongest swordsman is a shallow end goal, and this is reflected by Mihawk, who has obtained this title but seems no happier for it. Guys, I think that Mihawk already knows that there is something beyond that which he has been able to obtain. And as a continuation, further explanation of the last video that we made, titled "You Will Never See Mihawk the Same After This." And I think that's what Mihawk really wants, and what Zoro will really do. But the essence of this mastery is really simple. Physical attributes no longer matter. So that when Zoro attains this state, he will have done something more than accomplish Kuina's dream. He will also definitively show her that it was always possible, even though she may be a girl. And I think the best way to convey this in this story is by showing Tashigi the treasure that he found and encouraging her to find it for herself. But anyway, guys, I really wanted to include this following my Mihawk video because I originally cut it from the script, and in retrospect I regret it because it adds some context to the video that might be important to see Mihawk perhaps in a different way, as someone who failed to accomplish what it is that he really wanted, and questioning what it means for Mihawk to potentially begin the journey again. But unlocking this power isn't just about Zoro, and it isn't just about Mihawk. Everything that Zoro does has to be related to Kuina, and I feel like this is an under-discussed point that, I think that it matters. And gives Zoro a really awesome moment at the end of the story. Essentially a Gold Roger moment. And it also helps you better conceptualize what sword mastery really means in the story. But anyway, I'll leave links in the descriptions for videos that are relevant to this one. You guys can watch them if you want to. Certainly it will expound upon everything that we're talking about here. Remember to check out my book, The Booms. Volume 1 and 2 is out. Volume 3 is out on October 4th. I'm really excited for you guys to read the conclusion of this arc of my story. And if you guys do happen to read any of it, please leave a review and let other people know what you thought about it. Like the video, subscribe, click the bell to be notified, join the squad. And as always, guys, have a wonderful day.